Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the sideboard at the Cincinnati Standard Open. We're right before the top 8, so I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a rundown of the matchups that you're going to see the results of tonight. The matchup you'll actually be watching is Dan Caskey against, let me check that name real quick, Chris Weidinger. Yes, Chris Weidinger. Chris Weidinger went undefeated over the course of the tournament, accrued an 8-0-1 record, playing a new take on Frights, utilizing the Angel of Serenity combination. Angel of Serenity, in case you didn't know, with Unburial Rights, can remove an additional copy of itself alongside a variety of life-gaining creatures, and you can pretty much just kind of combo off from that point and summon a bunch of angels, gain a bunch of life, and make a giant angel. So his deck is well suited to fighting most creature decks. It generally just combos off. It's got Grizzly Salvage, Faithless Looting, and set up Lingering Souls. But he's got kind of a nightmare matchup, I think, in this Green-Black Zombies deck. It's not that Green-Black Zombies is itself a tough matchup for Frights. That may or may not be true. It kind of varies. But Dan Caskey's specific list has come with a lot of tools for this particular matchup. He has Tormod's Crypt in the sideboard. Graveyard Hate in and of itself is kind of bad for the deck, as you might imagine. He's also got Victim of Night in the sideboard to go with his Ultimate Prices in the main deck. Both of those are instant speed answers to the Angel, which means with the trigger on the stack removing a variety of creatures, he can actually just kill it, and those triggers will do nothing, as the Leaves Play trigger will resolve before the creatures are ever even removed. The other big issue, Crippling Blight. The M13 common, reasonable card in limited. In this matchup, its primary goal is going to be keeping Thragtusk out of combat. Paying 5 mana to gain 5 life is really not that big a deal. Zombie deck can easily come back over the 5 life. It's the fact that it blocks, makes another blocker, really slows them down in combat that becomes the most troublesome aspect of Thragtusk. So Crippling Blight's going to let him dodge that completely. And of course, he's not concerned about racing a 4/2 beast. That is very easy for a zombie deck to do. So I'm going to go ahead and give the advantage to Dan Caskey here. He has Duresses in his sideboard as well if he really wanted to bring them in. I don't think it's really worth his time to do that. He'd rather just keep his deck more threat dense and continue about his business. Moving to the next matchup, it's a Jund Mirror, but Lauren Nolan's Jund midrange deck is very different from Ryan Forsberg's Jund Zombie deck. The Zombie Jund deck is incorporating Lotleth Troll, Messenger, Aristocrat. It's got a pretty aggressive game plan. Lauren Nolan, much slower down. He's got Strangleroot Geist and Wolfear Avengers to kind of be aggressive when he needs to be, but also to gum up the ground. Huntmaster of the Fells can do the same trick, and of course Lauren himself has access to a bunch of Thragtusks. I think I favor Lauren in the matchup. He clearly came prepared to beat zombies. I imagine he's done it a number of times on the day already to accrue his current record of only 1 loss. Among his cards are Sever the Bloodline, Pillars of Flame. He has Mizium Moors, which is just a reasonable removal spell, but still a reasonable one. Rakdos Keyrune, actually bizarrely frustrating for a zombie deck from time to time, thanks to its first strike. And then once he gets to the sideboard, he even has access to Cremates to take care of Gravecrawlers and Drowse Messengers alike. So I think Lauren is just a little better prepared for the matchup than Ryan Forsberg, and I imagine he'll be walking in with the win. It's kind of close, though. It's only a few percentage points really in his direction. A more interesting matchup is Joe Bernal's Black-Red aggro deck against Zachary West's Jund midrange deck. Zachary West's deck is very similar to Lauren Nolan's. One of the primary differences is the addition of Dreadboard to the main deck. That primary difference is going to be a huge impact against Joe, whose sideboard plan involves Rakdos, Lord of Riots. Generally, Joe has struggled with green decks, specifically ones with Thragtusk. That's most green decks, as you can see, and Zachary West's deck is another Thragtusk deck. So game 1, Joe's probably a little bit behind. He may be able to sneak some wins. After all, he is playing, Bump in the Night and a bunch of burn spells, so it's not that hard to just get there. Post-board, he's been boarding in a land and relying on Rakdos, Lord of Riots to kind of carry him, while Sever the Bloodline and Dreadboard remove the larger green creatures from his path. However, if his opponent hits Dreadboards and Thragtusk of his own, then it's going to be very difficult for Joe to actually close it out through the air with Rakdos. I think that this matchup is really close to a flip. Post-board, Joe might be a slight favorite, but he's a pretty reasonable dog in game 1, so I think that has to give the advantage to Zachary West, but again, very slight. Our last matchup, I don't expect it to be especially close. Todd Anderson is playing Blue-White-Red Miracles. It's the Roanoke list. Jerry Thompson, Brad Nelson, Brian Braun-Duin, David McDarby, all of these guys played a variation on this list and did pretty well in the tournament. Dan Kaufman is playing Green-White aggro. Green-White aggro is another popular deck in the field, but one of the things that became consistently apparent was Green-White aggro does not have a lot of game against Miracles. The Blue-White-Red deck did a lot of trouncing of Green-White over the course of the day. It has tons of answers. Terminus and Supreme Verdict combined to really take control of the board, and if you're not going to commit multiple creatures to the board, then Tameo will very much punish the Green-White aggro deck for trying to go threat into a removal spell. I think that it's really hard to do much. You mostly have to try and jam the board and dodge all of those Wraths. that's not going to be working most of the time. Like, it's just not a great strategy. So I think it's advantaged Todd heavily in the pre-boarded games. Todd's boarding very little for the matchup, but that's because he doesn't need very much. He's got additional Supreme Verdicts coming out of the sideboard. His opponent has some Planeswalkers and Garruk Relentless. That might be good enough. Triumph of Ferocity is a reasonable card to kind of help him outlast all these sweepers. But realistically, Todd's just very favored. I expect him to take down the matchup. It might go to 3 games because on the play, a Triumph of Ferocity could actually give Dan enough cards to come out of it, but it's probably going to favor Todd. So that's what I'm calling the matchups. I'm going to go ahead and throw it back to the booth. You can hear Matthias Hunt and Zach Hall run down the Chris Weidinger and Dan Caskey matchup, which will be happening on screen for you right now.